Welcome to the Early Edge NFL Player Prop Show, brought to you by BetMGM, the sportsbook born in Vegas. I am your host, Eric Cohen, otherwise known as EC, and we are coming to you earlier than usual. We have a Black Friday NFL game between the Chiefs and the Raiders. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the show and give out some unofficial plays. But let's take a look at how we did last week. Proppy was so close. I mean, the Geno Smith line, he got it on the site at 253.5. And we had a 254.5 on the show. So close to an awesome week. But we're going to bounce back this week, and we have a special guest joining us to make it all that much more fun. So let's bring in the stars of the show. We have the Fantasy Hall of Famer, the one, the only, Uncle Dave Richard from CBS Sports. We have the best prop bettor, in my opinion, on the planet. He is number one in SportsLine's NBA standings. He was second in baseball. He dominated the NBA last year, and he's above 500 in the NFL this year. The one, the only, Propstarz. And then you'll see him in the chat. You'll see him. He's everywhere when it comes to Early Edge. He's the host of the Early Edge, the great handicapper, Sia Nejad, joining us. Sia, I'm going to start with you and just kind of throwing you one off the top here. So you're a Commanders fan, and they ruined the Bears the other week. And now we saw Matt Eberflus get the boot today. Just your thoughts on the Bears actually making their first head coaching fire in season in over 100 years.
I mentioned this on our FFT DFS show about 30 minutes ago, that if you were a casual fan of football or a person that had never seen a football game before but stumbled into the last 38 seconds, 35 seconds of the Bears game, you would have known, without knowing anything about the game itself or football, you would have known something really crazy is happening with the clock ticking down and just nothing happening, and Caleb Williams taking his time and the lack of a timeout from Eberflus. Like, just looking at that from a casual observer, it was worth firing. It was really, truly crazy. And you add that up with what happened in the Washington game, what's happened all this entire season. I never root for anybody's firing, but it was not a surprise to me at all that he got let go.
So, Uncle Dave, from a fantasy perspective, just because, and we'll get into props here momentarily, is this a good thing for the Bears, or they just auto-fade props, fantasy, the rest of the season?
No, it's a great thing. And they've really been on fire for the last couple of games since they fired Shane Waldron, their offensive coordinator, and they replaced him with Thomas Brown. But really what they did was they made things easier for Caleb Williams. And they had a healthy offensive line, certainly 2 games ago and for most of yesterday's game against the Lions. And really when the Lions started to fall apart defensively in the second half, they were losing guys to injury left and right. That's when you saw the Bears offense really take off. I think you're going to continue to see Chicago's offense be real strong through the air. Those receivers are too good. They can't be held down for that long. And Caleb Williams is proving to be an adequate, if not really great quarterback. So somewhere in between a solid starter and a really good starter. A lot of the throws that he made against Minnesota last Sunday were really incredible. Didn't have as many of those against the Lions, but he still had a few. I would imagine that the Bears will do everything they can to bring in a head coach and or an offensive play caller that can really work with Caleb Williams over the next few years, and he can develop into a great fantasy quarterback. But for the rest of this year, I'm absolutely going to look at their player props, and there will be overs to be had.
And that's what we need to hear. We have 5 more Bear games after, obviously, they played this week. So we'll see on the next 5 weeks how we approach it on the show. All right. Live from the all-new Propstarz HQ with a very green background, which I very much like. We're going to start with rushing props. Proppy, you dominate this section this week. You have 4 of them, but let's start with your boy Saquon Barkley. He leads the league in rushing. You're an Eagle fan. They've won 7 in a row. They're going up against Baltimore. What are you playing with Saquon this week?
So it may come to a surprise. As you guys know, I bleed green, but I'm going to fade Saquon this week, gentlemen. Going under 93.5 rushing yards for Saquon, who has easily just had an all-time great season, right? He's the leading candidate for Offensive Player of the Year, coming off the just monstrous performance last week versus the Rams, a career-best game. He's just been absolutely fantastic. If you were to point to one individual player that's had the biggest impact on the Eagles' success this season, I would say it's Saquon. He's really taken them over the top and just kind of stabilized that backfield and just contributes to the most dominant, versatile rushing attack in the NFL. But that being said, this is a big number, 93.5 yards, and it's coming against a very good Ravens rush defense. This is iron sharpens iron right here. This is strength versus strength. Really looking forward to this matchup. The Ravens, second in EPA allowed per rush, second in defensive success rate against the rush. I know that they have been watching and fully aware of how well Saquon has played. And definitely he's going to be the focal point of the defensive assignments this week. I think all the meetings are being held about Saquon, stopping him first and foremost, and making the Eagles one-dimensional, forcing Jalen Hurts to throw. And if the Eagles have been a little bit vulnerable, it's when Jalen Hurts has had to drop back. So I think this Baltimore defense is a significant pass funnel, partially because of this run defense being as strong as it is, the pass defense being significantly more vulnerable. As a result, teams tend to go pass heavy against them. Baltimore also has an offense led by an MVP candidate in Lamar Jackson, who's been fantastic in his own right, arguably the best season of his career, despite winning the MVP 2 years, that can push the Eagles and potentially get the Eagles to air it out a little bit more than they would normally like to. I just think the Ravens are going to potentially hold Saquon Barkley under 100 rush yards, and they're going to really do everything in their power, and they do have the personnel to make life difficult. Is Saquon capable of breaking a big run off them? Of course, but if there is a defense that could potentially bottle him up, in my opinion, it's this Ravens front seven. So I will fade Saquon, as uncomfortable and painful as it might be, under 93.5 rushing yards.
How low would you go, Proppy?
I'd go to 89.5.
Got it. Uncle Dave.
Roquan Smith was back at practice this week for the Ravens. If he's out, then I don't like this prop as much. If he's in, then I like this prop a lot. He's really the guy that helps shut down the run for the Ravens on defense.
The tone setter.
Very
you
well.
know, in the chat, IG says, Uncle Dave, the Under King, bring them on. Well, wait a second. Uncle Dave, your first pick is I thought Proppy was the Under King. Yeah, exactly. I agree. Uncle Dave, your first pick is I don't think an under. We're going to New England and Indianapolis here. We're talking running backs. I would have thought Jonathan Taylor, but nope. It's Ramondre Stevenson time.
And we're going over on his rush attempts, EC, over 13.5. It's a low number with a little bit of juice at minus 125. But I think he goes over this. There's been 5 games this year when Ramondre has had at least 20 carries or more. And the Patriots have either won those games or they've lost by 1 score. And I think that that's what's going to happen. I think this is going to be a close game between the Colts and the Patriots. I don't think Indy, even with Anthony Richardson playing at a higher level than he did earlier in the year, I don't think they're capable of blowing out anybody. And I know that you think about the Patriots and, oh, yeah, they've been blown out a bunch. It hasn't been as often as you think, and they've been competitive lately. I also want to point out that in the 6 games that Ramondre Stevenson has 13 or fewer carries, the Patriots did lose every single time. 2 of them were blowouts. There's an interesting wrinkle here. Ramondre has yet to have a game with 14 to 19 carries. It's either been very few and it's game script driven, or it's very high and, again, game script driven. It especially helps that 9 different running backs have 14 or more rush attempts against the Indianapolis Colts this year, including 1 in each of their past 7 games. So this is a defense that can be run on. The Patriots are going to know it. I think they get Ramondre Stevenson going. Don't necessarily have to start him in fantasy, but he is going to get you at least 14 carries in the game. He's going over 13.5 rush attempts, minus 125.
Fair enough. I like that very much. All right, Sia, in the chat, this one's for you. Jeff asked a great question here. What colors are Washington's uniforms? Is it cranberry and yellow? Please help us out.
We spent an entire week talking about how much I despise cranberry sauce at the Thanksgiving table. There was some unbelievable content and clips that came from that, some of which I posted, some of which I didn't post because honestly, I thought they'd be like borderline embarrassing to those that just couldn't control their laughter. That includes me as well. So Jeff is the funniest person in the Early Edge chat history. So he's coming at me with the cranberry joke. So that doesn't need an answer. Good stuff, Jeff.
And I would expect that we'll see new uniforms for the Commanders next year, potentially, as so some of the rumors are stating. We'll find out. All right, nonetheless, let's get back to it. Proppy, we're going to talk about a player that I have traded for and picked up in fantasy all over the place this year. One of my favorite utility players, let's say, in fantasy football. It is Jaylen Warren. I mean, listen, Uncle Dave's giving me the look. I mean, Jaylen Warren's not a top 20 guy, but every week, it seems, when he's healthy, Jaylen Warren does something positive. Proppy, will he be positive again this week?
I'm bullish on Jaylen Warren. You see, I'm going over 38.5 rushing yards for Jaylen Warren. What is a fantastic matchup. Jaylen Warren is back. Got off to the slow start, was playing hurt early in the year. Mike Tomlin saw enough, eventually shut him down, put him on injured reserve. He has come back. He looks every bit as dynamic as he did last season, when people were clamoring for him to ultimately get more touches than Najee Harris. He was the far more efficient back, one of the most efficient backs in all of the NFL last season. But this year, it was, again, a slow start, but over the last 5 weeks, he's averaging 11 carries per game. He's eclipsed this number in 5 consecutive games, and he's facing just an absolutely dismal Bengals run defense. They're bottom 3 in EPA allowed per rush, bottom 3 in success rate. Very generous to opposing running backs. So I think this number should be 45 to 47.5, getting a good value here for Jaylen Warren, who I expect to flirt with 10 to 12 touches at minimum and easily eclipse this 38.5 number.
I like it. Let's hope that works out that way. How about another player that I love in fantasy football? Sia, your turn to make your first pick on the show. Let's talk Bijan Robinson.
Well, this is a really good illustration of, I like Bijan Robinson's over 72.5 rushing yards. This is a really good illustration of how quickly lines can change. I have 2 picks that I was going to put in last night, but I waited, and then the lines started moving around. I'll talk about like the impact of the other pick when we get to it, but I just want everybody to know Bijan Robinson was 72.5 rush yards pretty much across the board as of last night. About 10:30 this morning, right after the early edge, I looked, and in some markets, he was 69.5, and he was holding steady at 72.5, 73.5 in other markets. Now, since I put my bet in on SportsLine, which I got at 72.5, now it's 75.5 across the board. Okay, so like it's just interesting. It's a Friday afternoon. We've seen this line fluctuate down 3 yards and up 6 yards pretty much across the board. With all that said, I do still think I'd play it at 75.5 rush yards, but I'll say this. Once you get to like maybe 76.5, maybe higher, I would start looking at his rush attempts versus his rushing yards, because I do think part of this analysis is the fact that he's going to get the carries. Before the bye, they played Denver. Denver completely worked them over like a lot of us thought they were going to do, and he didn't get many carries because he was game scripted out. But the 2 games prior to that, it was not the Tyler Algier show anymore. It was Bijan Robinson with 19 carries and 20 carries. In a game script like what I think we're going to see here, we're going to see Bijan Robinson closer to that 19 and 20, maybe in that 15 to 16 range in rushing attempts. And this Chargers defense, while we think it's like super formidable, the reality is from a yards per carry standpoint, they're allowing a lot of yards. They're up to almost 5 yards per carry. Now, a lot of that damage was done last week, so maybe that's a little unfair, but still, even prior to that game, allowing almost 4.5 yards per carry. And we see running back ones do serious damage to this team over the last 4, 5, 6 weeks. So give me Bijan Robinson, who is now truly getting what we thought the Bijan Robinson role should have been even last year. 72.5 is very attainable here.
Yeah, and Bijan started to take over a little bit more. We're not seeing as much Tyler Algier, which is a good thing if you're a Bijan Robinson fantasy football owner. So another running back situation that's interesting, Cincinnati, Proppy, with Chase Brown. Zach Moss, you and Uncle Dave loved to pick Zach Moss earlier this season. Well, Zach Moss is done. So let's talk about Chase Brown against the Steelers. Which way are you leaning?
Yeah, I'm going to fade Chase Brown this week, going under 66.5 rushing yards. I like Chase Brown a bunch. I've been very bullish on him, both from a fantasy standpoint and as far as props are concerned. But I think this is a good spot to fade him against Pittsburgh here. First of all, it's a big number for Chase Brown. Really why I like fading it, though, if we look at Chase Brown, his running style, he's very boom bust as far as his rushing is concerned. Averages a lot of breakaway yards. This Steelers defense, top 10 rushing unit, very good defense. They're extremely disciplined. They play their gaps very well. And I just think they limit big plays. So I think they're kind of a difficult matchup in addition to being a good rush defense for Chase Brown and that style of running specifically. I think they're going to limit his big plays. And I just think Chase Brown, the real value with him is his ability to both catch passes where he's an incredibly efficient player. I think he's top 3 in yards per route run. So very versatile running back. But as far as the rushing is concerned, he does leave some yards on the table, and the Pittsburgh defense is very good. So tough spot for Chase Brown, who I do think can have a big impact in the game, but it's likely to be catching passes. And I just think 67 rushing yards is a tall order. So I'm going to go under 66.5 rushing yards for Chase Brown.
All right, I'm going to get in my first play here, and that is Bucky Irving over 76.5 rushing plus receiving yards. Now, I'm not going to talk a lot about it because Proppy also has a Bucky Irving play. I will just say this. Carolina has the worst rushing defense in the league by far. He's over this number in 5 of his last 6 games, and in those games, he's averaging 15 touches for 90 yards per game. But the receiving yards are a key element of that, considering he's had at least 2 catches in every one of those games. He had 64 yards receiving last week. Proppy, you like the rushing for Bucky Irving. Why?
For a variety of reasons. First and foremost, Bucky Irving has been absolutely sensational. Very encouraged by his usage, bookending the bye week, before the bye week and after the bye week. Before the bye week, handled 12 carries. After the bye week, handled 13 carries. It appears to me that the coaching staff has finally acquiesced and relented, and they're seeing everything that everyone who's watching this backfield has seen, and that's a highly efficient, dynamic, explosive running back compared to one who was pretty much the opposite as far as efficiency metrics are concerned. Rachaad White, well, the coaching staff clearly trusts him, is nowhere near as good as Bucky Irving, who is so explosive, so dynamic, capable of getting chunk plays here. So I absolutely love this spot. I think he is going to be the feature back, and I think he will end up with more touches than any other back in this Tampa Bay backfield. Also, it's impressive how well Tampa Bay, their offensive success rate rushing the football. This is a team that over the last 2 seasons.
Oh, we've got Proppy's internet has cut out. Okay, it's cut out for this spot.
I love this.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Uncle Dave.
Irving has really stepped up as the number 1 guy for them. And it started to happen before their bye, coming out of the bye against the Giants. The best way I can put it is this. He had as many rush attempts as Rachaad White and Sean Tucker combined in the first 3 quarters of the game. And although it wasn't a great rushing average, he still had some good moments, and he's going to be on the field a lot. And as long as this game's competitive, and you'll hear me talk about how I think this game is actually going to be competitive between the Panthers and the Bucs, we will see Bucky Irving getting a lot of work. I think he can go over this number. And I like your total number even more than just the rushing yards alone. But Bucky Irving is definitely in play to be one of those running backs where fantasy managers are going to win because of him.
Okay, go ahead, Sia. Oh, Sia, we're on mute. Okay, yeah, hold on. There we go.
Bucky Irving on DraftKings is only $5,800. Chase Brown on DraftKings is only $6,200. They'll both be very popular for the reasons we all just kind of said out. And I know we had the Chase Brown under, but that was just the rushing yards, right? It's pretty high for somebody that's 6,200. So if you're playing DFS, Bucky Irving, Chase Brown, popular for good reason.
All right, Uncle Dave, I have you here. You're the foremost fantasy football expert in the world, in my opinion. JSN or Bucky Irving, half-point PPR?
I'd probably lean toward Irving just because of his chances to get, I don't know if he's certainly not going to catch as many passes as Smith and Jigba is, but the fact that it's a half PPR just makes me kind of veer away from the wide receiver. I don't mind the matchup for JSN, and he is my favorite Seahawks receiver moving forward, but Bucky Irving has a better chance to get more total yards and a touchdown.
I appreciate that. All right, coming up next, Sia and Uncle Dave have a combo play. It's kind of fun after we hear from one of our sponsors. All right, so this is kind of a fun one here. Uncle Dave, we're going to start with passing props. We'll start with Justin Herbert here. So you love to play the attempts, over completions, attempts, that type of thing. Which way are you leaning this week?
I lost on a Herbert prop last week, and I thought I was off to a great start in that game. But this week, I think we're going to hit this one. This is over 20.5 completions at -125 from our pals at BetMGM. And I just love the situation that Herbert is walking into for this game. The Falcons reliably play heavy zone coverage, and they are awful at pressuring the quarterback. This is the exact case that I made for Bo Nix to go over his completion prop a couple of weeks ago. Case in point, the Falcons have 10 sacks on the season. That's as a team. That's combined. That's all their games together. They've played more games than they have sacks. So Herbert's going to be able to pick them apart. especially without a proven run game. We know J.K. Dobbins is out this week. Gus Edwards is back. Gus Edwards looks old. Kamani Vidal is the rookie running back. I don't know if the coaches are going to trust him completely. I think they're going to trust Justin Herbert completely. Wouldn't surprise me in the least if Herbert threw 5-6 screen passes and used that as an extended version of the run game to take a little bit of pressure off of Herbert when he does actually drop back to pass, and then he's not pressured and he fires downfield to McConkey, and hopefully Quentin Johnson catches a few balls this week. Herbert would have gone over the yardage prop if it weren't for Quentin Johnston. And there's always the chance this game becomes a shootout. And if it does, then it's going to be a slam dunk that Herbert goes over 21 pass completions in the game. So to me, this is one of the easiest, I don't know if I want to use the word easiest, but one of my favorite props of the week, over 20.5 completions.
So, Sia, based on what Uncle Dave said, Justin Herbert's one of my favorite DFS quarterback plays this week because I still don't think he's being priced the way he should be. Which way are you leaning for Justin Herbert this week?
He's in the mid 5Ks. He should be at least in the low 6Ks when we're talking about DFS pricing. I love Dave's play. I mean, honestly, I would say I like it even a little bit better than my play. I think this line should be 21.5. The reason I said that is because last week I lost this very same play, Justin Herbert over 1.5 touchdown passes. But I like the situation even better here for all the reasons Dave said. He's going to have, so prior to last week where he had 0 touchdown passes, thanks in part to Quentin Johnston and some drops, he had hit 2 touchdowns in 3 of the previous 4 games. And I think this is the game script where we're going to have a pretty good back and forth, a high scoring game. The low pressure rate for Atlanta is a really big deal. J.K. Dobbins, who, by the way, I mean, hate to rewrite history here, but it's not like he was super efficient in the first place outside of maybe 3 games, if not maybe 2 games. But the reality is he was their best running back, and Gus Edwards and Kamani Vidal are just not going to be that good. And the really cool part is not only are they just very average running backs, but when you get to the red zone, Atlanta actually tightens up against the run game. So I think that's going to force even more passing from Justin Herbert, but that's probably the route they go anyway. I think they score 3 to 4 touchdowns. I think Justin Herbert throws for at least 2. So I like him over 1.5 touchdown passes, but I got to say, I like him over 20.5 completions. I think that number should be 21.5. Wouldn't surprise me if he gets to 23, 24.
Don't you love that Uncle Dave and Sia synergy? I mean, that is what we're looking for. That is a gift here on Black Friday. All right, Uncle Dave, back to you for more completion props. Baker Mayfield. Well, we just talked about Bucky Irving, a lot of running. So that means Baker Mayfield's not going to throw as much, right?
Well, but he's going to throw to Bucky, and he throws a little bit to Rachaad White, and those running backs help him get over 22.5 pass completions against the Carolina Panthers. And this is almost the exact same setup that I talked about with Justin Herbert. Carolina, they're the second worst in the league at getting pressure on quarterbacks. They have only 17 sacks on the season. That's second worst. You already know who's last. And like the Falcons, they play a lot of zone-heavy coverage. They don't want to give up the big play, but they're happy to give up a short throw for 5 yards or 6 yards, 7 yards, something like that. And I think Baker Mayfield's going to do a lot of that. He'll be comfortable in the pocket. And Tampa's defense isn't great either. And Carolina, winners of 2 of their last 3, and they went toe-to-toe with the Kansas City Chiefs last week. Yeah, I think this is going to be a competitive game. I feel better about this game being competitive than I do the Chargers-Falcons as far as being high-scoring, back and forth, close score. Quarterbacks are going to have to throw a lot in the game. And I kind of wanted to go with Bryce Young's completion over, but I didn't want to do it against a defense that could blitz him a lot, and that's something that certainly Tampa Bay has had success with. So let's go with Baker Mayfield getting over 22.5 pass completions, and it's only minus 113. A little bit of juice for Baker in this matchup.
All right. I like it. Uncle Dave. I'm going to play a game that I think is going to be a shootout. Matthew Stafford over 254 passing yards, 254.5 passing yards at minus 115 against the New Orleans Saints. So in the 6 games that Puka Nacua has played in, Stafford has thrown for 279 or more yards in 5 of them. The only one that he didn't was against Proppy's Eagles on Sunday night because the Eagles have one of the best secondaries in the NFL. When Puka plays, things are good. And oh, by the way, the Saints happen to allow the 3rd most passing yards per game, nearly 257. And they happen to play man coverage at a top 10 rate. And they've been sliced and diced, allowing 16.4 yards per reception in man coverage. That's 2nd most. How the heck do you think they're going to fare against Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp? Good luck. I think he goes over 300 yards. I would play this. I mean, that 279 number with the Stafford stat I just gave out when Nakua plays. You want to take a shot, ladder it up a little bit? Let's have a little bit of fun with it. So I love this number. Anything below 260 and even probably above that, I would take Matthew Stafford against the Saints. Proppy, what do you think about that? Just to get you, I know you don't have any passing props. Just your thoughts on Stafford now in a game that should be a higher, more scoring, you'd think.
I think it's a little contingent on the Saints being able to push the Rams. I think the Rams will look to establish Kyren Williams. The Saints' rush defense has been porous, dismal. And if we look at the Saints' offense, they play a heavy ball control style offense, and they're going to run the ball and dink and dunk as well. So I don't know if the passing volume will be there necessarily for Matt Stafford. If the Saints are able to push the Rams into a higher scoring environment where we see an uptick in volume, then I would like it, but I just don't have enough confidence in this New Orleans Saints team to do that.
Okay, go ahead, Sia.
Well, just real quick, I do like the Rams play or the Stafford play, but I did want to point out a couple of things. One is that Puka Nacua was a play I almost brought to this show over 79.5 receiving yards. Just the way he gets schemed and the way he just comes down with everything. I know this is a high number, but I do like him. I think he'll help that Stafford prop out quite a bit. And I just have to mention, because Dave mentioned Bryce Young, and I mentioned DFS earlier in FFT DFS. Bryce Young is 4,700, and David Moore, who is another play I almost brought to this show. His prop is 35.5 yards. He had 10 targets, caught 6 of them for 81 yards last week. Again, that's just a 1-week sample size, but he is emerging since the Jalen Coker injury. That combo is 4,700 to 3,500. So if Dave is right that this is going to be a bit of a back and forth, you throw in Bucky Irving to that stack, you throw in Mike Evans, then you go to that New Orleans game, you throw in Kamal. Like, there's a lot you can do. So I just wanted to say I like the Bryce Young call out.
Fair enough. Uncle Dave, you have one more here in our passing section. We've done completions. We haven't had an Uncle Dave passing attempts prop yet until now.
And it's going to be an under. Sam Darnold under 32.5 pass attempts at -125. I think by now you'll see at your books that it's at 31.5. I would take the under there too. 31.5, I would play it down to. Darnold threw 34 passes last week. Wound up being a competitive game that went into overtime against Chicago, but I don't think this week will be the same. Just like Chicago, Arizona plays a lot of zone coverage, but unlike Chicago, Arizona's pass rush has gotten hot. They have 14 sacks in their past 3 games, and we all know that Darnold's never been a consistent thrower when he's been under pressure. There's a question mark at left tackle for the Vikings offensive line. Even if Cam Robinson plays, he won't be at 100%. And so the thought in my head is, what better way to combat that pass rush than by giving Aaron Jones and the Vikings run game a lot of work? And with the Vikings defense expected to hammer the Cardinals offense, Darnold won't have to pass a ton anyway. The best part is that he's thrown 33 passes in just 3 games this season. I should say 33 or more in just 3 games this season. It's not typical for Darnold to throw a lot, and he shouldn't have to throw a lot this week. Under 32.5 pass attempts or 31.5 pass attempts if you happen to find that.
All right, let's stay with that game, Uncle Dave, and bring in. Or go ahead, Proppy, because you're going to have.
I'm going to right. It's been a little bit since we've had a showdown on the show. I'm going to right now challenge Uncle Dave. If he's willing to accept, I will go over 31. If we can agree on the number of passing attempts for Sam Darnold, I will go over 31.5 passing attempts for Sam Darnold. Dave, do I have a dancing partner?
You absolutely do. Let's absolutely make that happen. Yes. It's gonna be a showdown.
That is the first time that we've had a showdown on a show that I've been on since Sia and me, or Patrick and me, in the golf show back in the summer. So it's nice to actually hear the music again. I'm excited to watch how this plays out between Uncle Dave and Proppy. All right, Proppy, we're going to stick with you because you want to talk about that same game. We're going to go over to receiving props. Jordan Addison's been hot for the Vikings, but no, you're not going to play Addison this week. Who are you playing?
I'm going to go with Old Faithful, Justin Jefferson, getting a significant discount on his receiving line. This was on MGM a few moments ago at 78.5. Most books have it at 81.5. I'm comfortable playing it up to 84.5 just for the record, so certainly should be able to get a playable number here, but I look I love this spot for Justin Jefferson to potentially have triple digits. It's been an interesting season for Justin Jefferson. He hasn't gone bonkers and nuclear like he has in previous years, but Justin Jefferson has had double-digit targets one time this year. He has been a volume king throughout his career, but we've seen a much more balanced offense with Minnesota. Also, when things are going well, he's not going to complain, but he's had 3 subpar games by his standards. I think there's going to be a little bit of a squeaky wheel narrative with Justin Jefferson, and I like this matchup against an Arizona pass defense that has not been very good. Dave did mention the pass rush. It has improved. They were as bad as it was as far as blitzing and getting home on blitzes early in the season, so they have been a little bit better in that department, but the pass defense has been dreadful for the Cardinals. I also think the Cardinals are capable offensively of pushing the Vikings. I think the Vikings are a little bit overrated as far as their record is concerned, and I could see this game being competitive, frankly, which is why I like Sam Darnold to potentially eclipse his number here. But I look at this Cardinals team as a potential spoiler, but I look at this as a potential spike week for Justin Jefferson. Love that we're getting a discount. I view this as a plus matchup, and I think he has a big game in the process. So we'll take the discount over 78.5 receiving yards. But again, I'd play this one up to 83 or 84.5.
It would not be a Friday prop show if Proppy didn't use adjectives like nuclear.
Yes, I will be laddering Justin Jefferson as well.
All right, there we go. Uncle Dave, TJ Hawkinson over 40.5 yards, asked by Mike in the chat. Your thoughts?
It's a competitive line. I disagree on how this game's going to go, obviously, with Proppy. So I think it's going to be an underplay. I honestly think the Vikings are going to be able to run the ball. And I'm very nervous about the Cardinals starting up front with their offensive line. They really did not look good there last week. And this Vikings pass rush is all over every quarterback that they play. I honestly think the genesis of the Vikings offense and how they'll win is going to be with the run.
Kyler Murray has actually been as good as any quarterback in the NFL this season under pressure. With a clean pocket, he's actually struggled. Under pressure, Kyler Murray has been fantastic this year. Kind of interesting considering usually quarterbacks perform much better with a clean pocket. Not been the case with Kyler Murray, who's been one of the best quarterbacks from an efficiency standpoint when under duress.
Fair enough. All right. Now, Sia, Jeff in the chat earlier mentioned that Mike Evans, to keep his 1,000-yard streak alive, needs to average 98 yards the rest of the year. And you think maybe starting this week, we got a shot here. What are you playing with Mike Evans?
I mean, maybe he hits 125 this week, which would be double his line. This is the other play that I was saying where the line kind of was super curious. Last night, I was looking at this line. I don't think you're going to believe this. His over was 56.5. And I was looking at it and I was like, oh, okay. He must have had like something at practice, like something with his hamstring, aggravated it or something like that. Well, there was no news about that. And for some reason last night, I didn't put the bet into SportsLine. Today, this morning, I look at it. It's 60.5. It's 61.5 in some places. I still think this line is disrespectful. First of all, last week he cleared this, and they basically didn't even need him in the second half. He got a lot of work in the first half. They really didn't need him after that. But he is the alpha receiver. Like, we're not seeing guys like Sterling Shepard, Jalen McMillan get looks down the field. Even Cade Otton got phased out a little last week. Of course, Bucky Irving, Rachaad White, they're going to get their looks. But Mike Evans is the downfield guy. He can do this on 3 receptions, but I actually expect him to get somewhere between 6 and 7, maybe 8 receptions, especially if Dave and I are right with respect to Carolina at least being a little bit competitive. Keep in mind, the Bucs defense, they got some guys back on the back end, but we've got Thielen healthy now. Again, David Moore has stepped up. Xavier Legette looks like he's stepping up a little bit, and then Chuba Hubbard as well. So I do think this could be a bit of a back and forth. And if this is a back and forth, and Carolina puts up somewhere between 16 and 23, 24 points, you could see Mike Evans easily clear 100 here, but I'll take the over 60.5 receiving yards.
All right. There you have it. That makes a lot of sense, and I appreciate that play. I'm gonna give one here with T. Higgins over 70.5 receiving yards against the Steelers at -115. Here's why I like it. In his last 4 against Pittsburgh, Proppy, don't roll your eyes at me, he has 300+ yard games. In his last 4 that he's played this season, he's averaging 10 or more targets in those, or he's averaging more than 10 targets in those games. And the Steelers use single high at the highest rate in the NFL. Against single high, T. Higgins has a 42% first read share and a 29% target share. That is good enough for me. Plus, with Joey Porter potentially locking up Jamar Chase, this could be a T. Higgins game. Taking a shot. This is the play that I like the most. Didn't make any of these plays 1.5 units, but I like T. Higgins this week. All right, Uncle Dave, you have one more receiving prop for us. Tell us what it is.
Oh, I mean, it's the best pass catcher in the history of New Orleans Saints football, EC. It's Taysom Hill. Over 26.5 receiving yards at -125. Okay. He might be their best pass catcher right now with Chris Olave on the sideline and Rashid Shaheed's out and all that stuff. He's been good for them since Olave's went down. At least 2 catches, at least 36 receiving yards in each of 2 games. He's also landed a route rate of at least 60% in each of those 2 games. Listen, New Orleans ran out of guys who could catch the football. They're using Taysom Hill in that role just as much as they use him. They probably use him a little bit more than as a runner as well. So there's certainly an opportunity for Taysom Hill to continue this production against the Rams, who play a high rate of zone coverage. They create those underneath opportunities for Derek Carr. Taysom Hill's ADOT has been 3.2 yards or fewer in each of his past 3 games. And even before Olave got hurt, he was still getting at least 36 receiving yards. It's each of his past 3 games, and he's been running a route at about half the time. This is not a new development for the New Orleans Saints. This is somebody who's going to continue to stay involved, and this is a matchup where I'm not sure if the Rams are going to be able to throw it or if the Rams will throw a ton or not. But I do see a situation where New Orleans is going to need to eventually put the ball in the air, and this is where it's going to go to Taysom Hill. It should be easy over 26.5 receiving yards at -125.
So not only that, Dave, but I look at Taysom Hill as a touchdown. He steals touchdowns from players that you need to score them in fantasy football.
Mm-hmm.
AKA Alvin Kamara. It's happened the Saints' last 2 games and cost me a parlay in both games. But I say that because there's a way for you to make some money, or at least keep your money with BetMGM if Taysom Hill scores the first touchdown on Sunday against the Rams. We've all had our first touchdown bet called back before, and BetMGM is giving you a second chance. With BetMGM's Pro Football Second Chance, place any first touchdown score bet. If your player doesn't score first but scores second, get your entire stake back in cash. No opt-in required. Here's how it works. Place a pregame straight first touchdown score bet in any NFL game. If your player scores the first touchdown in the game, win your wager as normal. If your player scores the second touchdown in the game, you'll get your stake back in cash. It's that simple. Log into BetMGM for more details. So if you don't have Taysom Hill to score the first touchdown, but he scores second, MGM will give you your money back, and probably is what's going to happen on Sunday. Coming up next, a bet that's so good, I had to tell a superstar about it after we hear from one of our sponsors.
CBS Sports HQ, giving you college football coverage unlike anyone else.
We're talking Big Ten.
Pre- and post-game coverage.
Are you encouraged with the way that this team responded?
Along with breaking news.
A lot of movement in the rankings this week.
Highlights and expert analysis.
That streak could be in jeopardy here.
Sure. What was your main takeaway from this game? How impressive was his domination?
That really changed the football game.
Let's go ahead and have some more fun.
Another wild ending.
The chaos continues.
Turn to CBS Sports HQ.
So last week before the games on Sunday, I'm sitting in the sports book and with some friends, and who walks up but one Charles Barkley. And he comes and sits down, and he has a drink. He has a drink with us, which is great. It's an expensive drink. I'll tell that story another time. Barkley sits down, and I say, "Hey, Charles, I got a bet for you that doesn't lose." And I swear I did this. I said, Matt Gay, over 1.5 field goals, has hit in 7 straight games, or hit in 8 straight games. I said, you need to go bet this. His buddy on the right there in that picture goes up to the window and bets Matt Gay over 1.5 field goals. Well, the Colts scored 6 points to Matt Gay field goals. So what do you think we're going to do this week against the New England Patriots? We're going with Matt Gay over 1.5 field goals. It's a little juicy at -130. 9 straight games going over this prop. And against the Patriots, opposing teams have multiple attempts in 8 of 12 games. Good enough for me. I think Matt Gay makes it 10 in a row. Unfortunately, they have a bye week next week, so we won't be able to play it again. But to save that, this is what we do. The Matt Gay over prop is a hit. All right, go ahead, Uncle Dick.
Call this the Sir Charles prop?
We might have to. Yeah, it did help me pay for the my contribution to the drink that we shared with Sir Charles at 10:45 in the morning before the game started here in Arizona. Go ahead, Sia.
Well, can I just ask you, I always think it's always like an interesting situation when a celebrity is walking by Did you like call him over? Did you say his name? Did he just happen to be sitting there and you guys sat down too? How did that actual moment happen?
So we had seen him in the sports book a couple weeks before, and he gave us an anytime touchdown score bet, ironically, of Terry McLaurin. And McLaurin got down to the 1 yard line. This was against the Steelers. He got down to the 1, so he didn't score. So a couple weeks later, we see Barkley, and we say he's walking by us. We say, hey, Chuck, you gave us McLaurin the other week. What do you got for us this week? And he just literally sits down right next to me.
Love it.
And we're talking Auburn, Texas A&M football. He's a true gentleman, and he loves his picks. He gave out telling us his picks. He had the Dolphins last week against the Patriots. That hit. He had the Colts against the Lions. That did not hit. But he loved the Panthers with the points against Kansas City. So he had a nice day. I did not see him later in the day. He came back after I left. But there you go. Sir Charles, a true gentleman. All right, let's bring up the recap screen. Instead of reading it out, Sia, of the props on this board that are not your own, which is your favorite?
Oh, of the ones that are not my own.
That are not your own. Yeah.
It would have to be Dave's play of Justin Herbert over 20.5 completions.
Okay. All right, Proppy, what is your favorite play? Since you like to go around the horn, your favorite play on the board from Uncle Dave, Sia, and if you want to throw in me, great.
Yours is going to be Bucky Irving since we overlap there, EC. Probably Ramondre Stevenson for Dave and Bijan for Sia.
Dave, your favorite plays across the board?
I'm going to go with the Bucky Irving combo platter that you've got, EC. That's definitely my favorite one of the bunch.
All right, and there we go. Let's talk now. But while we're here on a Friday, we have a Black Friday game that I want to talk to. There are no official plays that we have for this game, but I want to talk Chiefs and Raiders. Proppy, I'll start with you here. Do you have any thoughts on maybe somebody that you would look at, a Brock Bowers, Travis Kelce, Isaiah Pacheco is back? Just any thoughts that you have on this game today?
I do think Brock Bowers is in line for a potentially big workload. That's obviously reflected if we look at his props. However, 6.5 is the receptions, the yards up around 62, 63.5. I would lean over on the yards. Aiden O'Connell doesn't inspire a lot of confidence. Neither does the Raiders just in general. Brock Bowers has been tremendous despite the subpar team around him. So, it's Brock Bowers or nothing for me. I did like Patrick Mahomes over 1.5 touchdowns. That opened, I think, at minus 140 up to like minus 210 on both books. I did catch that around minus 150 just yesterday. But, nothing I absolutely love as far as anything that's available right now.
Sia, you didn't give out a play on the morning show today. I just want to lean. What do you got for us today?
Yeah, my play on the morning show was the Justin Herbert thing, so it certainly wasn't on this game. My lean would be Xavier Worthy over 34.5 receiving yards. I mean, they're clearly listen, he's not a great receiver, right? At least he's not a great receiver yet. He's got to get his footwork down. But they're clearly trying to get him involved. And I think that makes sense for their playoff run. They got to get Xavier Worthy going. And I've noticed they've tried to get involved early in games. So not only do I like him over 34.5 receiving yards, I don't know how many catches he'll get. Maybe you could do a reverse correlation under receptions, which I'm guessing, I don't know, is like 2.5, or maybe it's even as high as 3.5 under there. And then over on an alt line of like 60, 70 yards. But here's the thing. I like his over 34.5 receiving yards. And let's pepper in a first touchdown score. He's 10-1. Xavier Worthy is your first touchdown scorer. Raiders, Chiefs.
You always are the master of the gem. So that's a good bet at 10-1. All right, Uncle Dave, I have a few questions for you about this game. Let's start with Isaiah Pacheco. What do you make of him this afternoon?
I would expect him to be very limited in his return from IR. We know that he broke his fibula, and there's a pretty consistent track record of Andy Reid kind of taking it easy with players in their first game, either back from injury or being acclimated to the team. You can look, for example, what DeAndre Hopkins did in his first game with Kansas City. Didn't necessarily play a lot for them and then started to get a little bit more work in. Now, he still hasn't had a full allotment of snaps. Hopkins hasn't yet. Something that might play into Xavier Worthy, who is getting a full allotment of snaps. But I do think that Isaiah Pacheco could be real limited early on and certainly in this game. So you might be able to get one more week out of Kareem Hunt in fantasy before you have to potentially just leave him on your bench and see what happens after that.
So Mike M in the chat says Kelce and Bowers 50+ receiving yards at plus 200. Is it worth a sprinkle, Dave?
I like the Bowers side of it. I'm just not sure on Travis Kelce. So I'd hesitate. I wouldn't do much than just maybe like a single sprinkle max on that prop.
So this game today is an ugly one. I mean, you got a 2-win team against a 11-win team, 10-win team, something like that. It's what SGPs are all about. So yes, I have a Kelsey and Brock Bowers 50+ yards in there with some other mush. So I mean, that's what you got to do. And there's a game on. Got to put something out there, guys. It has been a lot of fun. Sia, great having you on the show. It's we see you in the chat, and you and I have been on plenty of shows, but good to have you back on your old show. And obviously, you are welcome anytime to join us. Been great. So
thanks. Hey, thanks. Listen, thanks for having me. I'm very thankful that I had an opportunity to be on this show, but to be back with you guys feels like home. So again, thanks for having me. This has been great.
For Sia Nejad, we have for Uncle Dave, for the great Propstarz IMEC. Thanks for watching, and thanks to producer Jake behind the scenes, who does a great job, as always. As I always like to say, let's hit it big. Good luck.